we want to welcome you here. This is a pretty specific briefing dealing with fluorine-free and PFAS-free firefighting foam. Try saying that a couple of times, and you might start saying bad words. Anyway, so we're talking about solutions because that's one of the challenges with the agencies and the changing legislation for you to be able to know. And with us, we have Jane Hawkins Murphy. She's the CEO, and Tom Murphy's the COO. They are, as I mentioned, they're down in Destin, Florida, right?
Correct.
Yep, awesome. And I'm the Gov Brief host. Glad that you guys decided to brief us. Join us today. I want to welcome everybody here today and we have a couple of interesting arrivals with Tri-State Fire Department and Westmont. We first responders, we love it. That got passed down through the state organization. So we certainly appreciate you being here and what you do, because this is right in your lane. And we want to get your feedback as well. And folks from NIST, EPA, a lot of folks from FAA, a lot of interest in this from different angles and in the military as well. Real quick, we will talk about some briefing controls. We will be reviewing the National Defense Authorization Act. And that is going to be on Jane and Tom to describe that as the PFAS as well, because they're experts in this. And finding acceptable product replacements, because you can't use the one that is happening right where that you already have, right, Jane?
Correct.
And that's exactly why we're here. We'll get to some of your questions and answers and talk about some procurement options as well. As far as briefing controls, this is the traditional Zoom meeting. If you haven't done a Zoom meeting in the last year, I'm not sure where you've been, but you can control and make us bigger or smaller if you like, and you have controls there. There are session handouts that I'm going to drop into that in just a moment. Make sure that everybody can gain access to those, and those we'll make sure that you have access to those while we're doing this, as well as after. And participation is easy. We already have folks that are asking questions, which is fantastic. You can open up the chat and you can raise your hand if you'd like the dialogue. We always like the dialogue and the Q&A. And if there's something you want to take offline, you can send it to Yoda at avenuesare.com. Love it that they got Yoda on the team. And there are some folks that said this will be the best briefing ever. And I'm going to open this up real quick and talk about that. You can let us know where what you have. Oh, hold on a second. That's not where I wanted to go. Not with you guys anyway. But I wanted to let us know how this would work for you and what you'd like us to address. There's a couple of folks that asked for what do you do with the old foam? A couple of folks that said this will be the best briefing ever. You learn something. So they got to learn something, Jane and Tom. We can't just leave them hanging. And somebody else was talking about, what about the new supply? Who's the suppliers for that, and how do you know that they're going to be able to be used in their environment? So we appreciate that feedback. Let us know why you would like to do why this would be great for you. And a quick disclaimer: this event is not affiliated or endorsed by any agency. It's provided to you, the audience, for informational purposes only. This came from GSA so that you guys can actually participate and dialogue. So it is saying that it's voluntary, and any engagement is not an indication or endorsement to purchase from any vendor, including Avenues. So there you have it. Now you guys can share any information that you want. In fact, why did you decide to join us today? Are you a first responder that uses the foam? Are you responsible for firefighting safety? And you can choose as many as you want here. I'm responsible for environmental safety. Got some folks here from EPA. I'm certain that's part of that. Or you procure firefighting supplies and services, or my boss made me come. Somebody's got to be a Weisenheimer, right, Tom?
Yep.
We know somebody. There they are. I knew somebody was going to say it. All right, fantastic. And so while we're doing this, let's talk about Avenues, ARE, what that stands for, and how you guys got started. Jane, you want to give us an overview?
Sure. We've been formed. We formed in 2019. We've been doing business a lot longer than that. We are based in Mississippi, and we have a myriad of different things that we do. We are distributors and supply chain experts. Tom is a supply chain expert globally. but we provide firefighting chemicals, industrial hazard, vapor remediation. We have hazardous material test kits, absorbents. We do have some consumables as well. So we have basically evolved over time, trying to satisfy needs that are brought to our attention. And we are happily a 2021 certified hub zone. And then we're a woman-owned small business. It was a fight between Tom and I, whether we would be service disabled or whether we'd be women-owned, and I won the fight. So.
And I am so totally shocked that you're the winner.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I'm sure. Awesome. So we know, Tom, we know what it's about, man. Just saying. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. Thank you very much for that. We got a bunch of folks that are here for responsible for fire safety. I'm going to share that with everybody. Fire safety and also environmental safety. So we do appreciate that. And we do have a little bit of feedback. Let me shut that. I think I need to shut that down. Stop sharing that. Good deal. And then we have feedback from Bradley. Your timing is great. I was ankle deep in AFFF, right? That's how we say it. Is that what it is? AFFF 2 weeks ago. And an accident investigation. So welcome here, Bradley. You can give us some feedback. Any other insight that you have would be greatly appreciated. And Bernadette says, actually just interested in EPA changes. So we'll see if we can let you know about those as well. But thank you very much for that, Jane. What we're here about is Forever Chemicals. What does that mean, Jane and Tom? The PFAS and PFAS. What is that? What is that stuff?
So PFAS and PFAS are two fluorinated chemicals that are forever chemicals, which means they don't degrade over time. They don't break down over time, and they're toxic at certain levels, and it contaminates groundwater, ocean, river, agriculture, crops. So if you look at the mirror or the map, excuse me, that's an interactive map from the EPA.
Yep.
That, you can click on it and it will pull up exactly that specific location and the contamination and the suspected source of that contamination. And we'll have some slides in a minute that address that. The problem is that remediation is very difficult. It's going to be expensive. And right now, incineration has been taken off the table due to just the toxicity of these chemicals.
And I'm popping that link right in there so you can see this interactive map. It is, and the only answer that there is to stop using them. They don't have the replacements quite ready yet, right? So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. And I did some selfish things because we have a well here at our house in Woodstock. So Woodstock is just outside Baltimore where the Ravens are. So if you're from Pittsburgh, you can leave. Just kidding. But yeah, we have that, and then you have the president down there in Washington, and that's me here in Woodstock. And what I did is I looked just for my own selfish reasons to say, hey, is there any of this in my neighborhood? And the answer is yes, there's PFAS in my neighborhood, and look at what it's from. It's from the firefighting foam. So there you have it. And if you would like to check out yours, I just put the link in, and you can see in your neighborhood. You might not want to know because there's a whole ton of there's a lot of dots there, aren't there, Tom?
Yeah, and so bringing it back to why it's significant is last year the Bonhomme Richard burned in San Diego Bay. That vessel was equipped with firefighting foam, but they are restricted from using it within 12 miles of the international demarcation line. So in San Diego Bay, if they'd used the fluorinated foam, it had killed everything in the bay for about 10 years because they would have used about 1 million gallons of the foam itself, or the concentrate, mixed with seawater, just to be able to put the vessel out. But because they didn't have the access to the firefighting foam, the vessel burnt to its keel. So now that they've actually decommissioned the Bonhomme Richard, and it's going to a shipyard for scrap.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so they know that that's an issue. When did this start? When did they start realizing it was an issue?
back in I would say it started as early as 2014, 2015 era that some areas were looking at it. And I know the EPA started getting involved in it on or about 2016. And they're still refining their guidance and refining the I know they've published the acceptable limit is 70 parts per trillion. And even in the area that we're here in Southern Florida, Eglin Air Force Base, we looked at theirs. They're at 500,000 parts per trillion, so they're significantly over the limit. And I know that they're working for approved remediation methods and how to store it.
Yeah, and
Dave, you were at 13 parts per trillion, and we're at 550,000 parts per trillion. So that map, the interactive map, is really handy for information purposes. It has the military bases, it has cities and other sites on there, and all of the water testing. We saw numbers as high as 1.4 million parts per trillion on that map. So it is a great resource to look at your area or other areas and understand, that map by the EWA. And as far as those timelines go, I think the first non-fluorinated foam that I have done research and looking back to was in the early 2000s. And so the real publicity and kind of ramp up on this, like Tom said, started to happen, 2010 to 2014. And it's really the importance of it and the focus on it has in the last 3 to 5 years has taken on just a whole new beast. And it's a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. And that it's big because Congress got involved, and the PFAS Act of 2019, 2021. Tell us about that. That's kind of the driver as to why they cannot use it anymore, right?
Right. Actually, that's very true. The PFAS Action Act has been evolving over the last few years, and really its culminations of the research that's being done. It's going to take a lot more time to complete that research, and it'll evolve over time with the knowledge that's garnered. Mm-hmm. And the drinking water initiatives are the main, what I've discovered are the main driver, and what those standards will be and what the tolerances will be. The EPA has been charged with a very big job to determine what those numbers are. And in fairness to them, it's very expensive to do that research, and it takes time. And to get it right is it's just going to take a lot of time. And so the bottom line is, to stop using those forever chemicals, and the implications that those to remediate that, the implications will affect the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. Mm-hmm. So both of those things are an awfully big deal. Inside of that act, as it's evolving and it's pending right now, there are calls for certain dollars to be put towards the toxicity testing for the military, for firefighters. And the reason being is there are studies that have shown that the chemicals may be cancer causing, reproductive organ issues, kidney, liver, other organs. And so those are known things that are showing up. And, really we've had these types of chemicals since the mid 40s. Wow. So for all of this time, that's a lot of contamination. Yeah. And it's going to be tough to eliminate it completely, like Tom mentioned. And the other piece that's really important here is there's also some verbiage in the act that lends to these sites possibly being designated as hazardous material sites and becoming a Superfund designation area. And when an area is designated, piece of property is designated as a Superfund site, it becomes very expensive to remediate that area. It is, quote unquote, it's labeled and it's hard to sell that property. And it's going to be a big financial impact to not only the manufacturers of the PFAS product, but also to the owner of that property. So there are a lot of things that we can speak to maybe offline or in one-on-one conversations to help folks understand where they might be and in what state they might be.
Yeah.
PFAS Action Act is, certainly federal, but there are 19 or 20, it changes every day, that keeps adding on, different states that have additional legislation that's either on the table or has already been passed. And so we can help navigate some of that as well.
And it's really challenging because you're up against two really important factors, right? You have a fire that's immediate and that needs to be put out because you want to protect people, you want to protect property, and you want to keep the damage from the fire down. But we realize that over time that these foams have really caused a lot of trouble. In fact, Linda Anderson Carnahan says the EPA has published a drinking water lifetime health advisory for the sum of PFOA and PFAS. PFOA, what is that? PFOA, is it the same? I'm sure you guys know that, but of 700 parts per trillion. So that's lifetime health advisory. That's amazing. Okay, so I appreciate that, Linda, very much. That's good. That's good insight. And the other parts that we're talking about, NAVC is working on this as well for MILSPEC. Is that creating the MILSPEC for this? And that's for the military, but that also applies to other agencies as guidance, right?
So the Department of Defense determines MILSPECs or military specifications for items that they procure for all of the services. And depending on the product and depending on its use, depends on which service component has lead agency status. With regards to firefighting foam, it's specifically of interest to the Navy to contain the fires within ships. So NAVC, their sub-organization, the Naval Research Lab, is actually doing the testing and determining what that new MILSPEC will be. So the previous MILSPEC 24385 was for fluorinated foams, and it basically gave the parameters and the test requirements for it. And so they're taking fluorine-free foam now and testing it at the Naval Research Lab. So we expect them to have that MILSPEC sometime this year, before the end of this year. And so we've got several products that are at the Naval Research Lab being tested. But it's got to be fluorine-free. Again, it passed a multitude of tests. From a commercial standpoint, there are several tests with it. One is UL 162. The second one is ICAO, which is International Civil Aviation Organization, level B and level C testing. That's basically to put aircraft out on fire, and it would apply to civil aviation, but it also transfers to Department of Defense aviation assets also. There are NFPA standards, 11 and 18, specifically focus on fluorine or firefighting foam. And so right now, the products that we have are past the UL 162 and the ICAO level B and C, based on their extinguishing standards, shelf life. We have one product that it in of itself has an unlimited shelf life, but we have to restrict the shelf life of the product to 10 years because the container for the product shelf life is 10 years. So, I mean, if you moved it to a new container, it's basically a plastic container. Mm-hmm. But the products that we currently have are compatible with current systems and compatible with other substances. So it's not interreactive. It is environmentally friendly. It is biodegradable, non-toxic, and not considered a hazardous material.
Which is exactly what is required for the replacement. There are some other issues as well, there's other organizations, as you mentioned. You have NAVSEA on one side, and then forestry on the other side, in the civilian space, and FAA. They're doing testing as well.
Correct. So the Forestry Service uses USDA testing services up in Montana to do the testing for the firefighting foams that are approved to use with the Forestry Service, and then they have those distributed throughout really the West Coast and central U.S. For large forest fires. The key to governmental purchase is you've got to pass the Buy American Act, or BAA, and also be Berry Amendment compliant, which means the raw products, the production, and the distribution should be in the U.S. by U.S. personnel or U.S. citizens. And then the FAA actually built an indoor facility which is self-contained, and they began testing non-fluorinated foams January 2020 .
And then mandated it, right?
Yeah, and then they mandated no later than 2021 to be free of fluorinated foams.
And it shows to the urgency of the speed of trying to accomplish that, right? To come up with a solution. Because the only other thing is to stop having fires, right? That's what we have. Fires are outlawed. You can't have a fire. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly here, because it gets pretty crazy when you start putting these things together, and the complexities that it provides for agencies, especially in organizations and government organizations, and using this. So who wants to take this one?
Well, the good of the foam products that are being produced now, and the two that we represent, it works with existing equipment. Manufacturers are ready with supply now, and we have resources for equipment, including customization. So depending on your specific situation, we have a team of engineers that can design a system tailored to your requirements. We do have portable compressed air systems that you would basically fill a tank, mix the concentrate with the water in the tank, and have charged compressed air tanks that would distribute the foam, and you'd have an expansion of about 20 times the water volume or the liquid volume. As an example, if you had a 10-gallon system, it would produce 200 gallons of foam. Same thing for a 30-gallon system would be 600 gallons of foam. The bad part about existing equipment is it has residual fluorine chemicals in it. And unless you specifically disassembled the entire system, cleaned every single part, and tested it for fluorination, and then put it back together, that would be the only way that you would be able to determine that you were 100% fluorine free. So to some extent, as you transition from fluorinated foam to the fluorine free foam, there's going to have to be an acceptable amount of risk that over time the fluorine is going to be negligible, and that gets to the ugly of it, replacement parts.
Yeah.
And the time to replace, a firefighting truck that is used for fluorinated foam to a closed building system that uses a fluorinated foam. So therein lies the difficult choices that are going to need to be made as to what is replaced and what do we have that accepts that minuscule amount of residual fluorine that's left in a system.
Yeah.
I'll say those numbers on the ugly, that's only a Department of Defense estimate. So beyond Department of Defense, those numbers are going to be enormous, whether it's commercial or any of the other government agencies. So, and the estimated 18 years at 50% is based on what's commercially produced right now. If they were to acquire 50% of what is commercially produced, and there's different sizes, every entity has different sizes of equipment. And so I think a lot of the equipment manufacturers, we know this, are really working on how they can ramp up their production and acquire the raw materials, because as we know right now, raw materials and so much of manufacturing is challenged. So that's another factor that we face.
Yep. And it is what there's good news on the horizon, because once they get the MILSPEC nailed down and the EPA can come with some of the acceptable residual levels as mentioned there in the bad, that doesn't mean that it's not happening. It's happening. It just it takes time. You mentioned it, Jane. It just takes time to test these things to make sure we're not creating another problem, right?
Right.
So there you have it. So what is your biggest issue with getting into the transitioning to the new foam? If you look at this, what do I do with the old foam? We had somebody just ask that question. What do we do with it? Maybe you have to have MILSPEC because you're in DOD. You have to have USDA approval because you're dealing with either the FAA or the Forest Service, right? And everybody should click budget. It's not like there's all of a sudden bippity boppity boo billions that we can just throw at this. And then qualified vendors. It's very difficult, and that's why I love what you guys have done to do the research to help folks understand who is available to them as far as products that are available and can have replacement. And do you also supply the equipment? I know you guys have foam, but you have access to equipment as well?
We do, yes.
Okay.
We have a couple of different firms that can supply equipment and parts.
Awesome. All right. So you guys can participate in this as well. It's not hard. You can raise your hand. You can do the chat. I'm reading a couple of things here. What is the appropriate disposal for AFFF products with PFAS? From Paul.
So Paul, the challenge is going to be, number one, the interstate transport of that, because it is a hazardous chemical. So being able to get it from your site to a disposal site, there are several disposal sites that we're affiliated with, and we can provide you guidance on that and cost estimates for disposal of the foam. Back to the foam companies that we represent, I'll just let you know that foam is 100% compatible with any firefighting equipment that you've got, that you're in currently use with the AFFF. So, but we can provide you contact information for the people to assist you in the disposal of the AFFF that you have currently on hand.
And I think something else to mention is that's a moving target. And so we really have worked hard to stay on top of that as much as possible, because there will be other regulations. And, once again, the EPA has been charged with another big job to determine what is the acceptable process for disposal and removal. And, that, once again, that's a long-term and changing guidance. So we need to stay on top of that. And we are, and we can help with whatever state you're in. If it's not not a federal entity, that we can try to help guide you there as well. And once again, our partners have been really great in helping us understand their processes of what they've done in the past and kind of where they see this heading. So.
Yep. And that is the number one issue with folks. What do you do with the old foam? So we appreciate that. And as that moving target continues, we'll keep you updated. We'll send some updates as a result of this. Let's see. Is there a timeline for AFFF to be fully replaced by FFF in the U.S. Air Force use? That comes from Adam. Does that follow the MILSPEC piece, I would think?
It does. Tom, did you hear that?
Yeah, it does require MILSPEC for use in the Air Force.
Yep. So that it shouldn't be too long where and that, because that's hot on their list, right?
Correct. So Paul has a question. Says, are any of the foam manufacturers offering to take back or swap out programs to clients? And not that I know of. A lot of the manufacturers of the fluorinated foam, or the AFFF, are in a legal fight right now based upon a class action suit against them due to the toxicity and the hazardness of the fluorinated foam. So I don't know that manufacturers are going to offer a take back or swap out program to clients. I think clients are going to have to have a disposal of their fluorinated foam, and then they would have to re-procure a fluorine-free foam. It's not the best situation, but I think that's the realistic situation that we currently are faced with.
Yeah, don't shoot the messenger, Paul. They didn't. It's not. But yeah, to your point, it is a moving target right now, and the AFFF folks are under some serious pressure. And Michael says it's almost as if AFFF needs to be treated like nuclear waste stored indefinitely. And you're absolutely spot on. That's a spot on. What do you have to say? Jane, we were talking about that the other day. And how they're looking at storing it.
Pardon me?
How they're looking at storing it.
Right. So, some of the guidance that I've read, says without having the, approval of how to dispose of the product, that be prepared to store the product and contain the product is another big one. Maybe 2-3 years, possibly more, until there's been a determination as to what is the acceptable way of disposal. And so I think that, like we said, this moving target of how do we dispose of it, it's going to depend on what your area is, what your requirements are, state, federal, all those other kinds of things that are going to matter. And, that's something, once again, that I read, and I know there's a few EPA folks on here, but, they've been given a pretty big job to determine how that's going to be done. And so I think storage is going to be a big, big factor. And where are we going to store that and contain it? So
Bernadette Chasson makes a comment that she found incineration and solidified cement kiln dust, then final disposal. That is true, but it's not applicable to all states. There are some states like California that ban incineration of the product. So the product would have to be relocated to an appropriate approved incineration facility, and then whatever the solidified waste is would then be a final disposition. Another alternative would be, prior to incineration, is having a chemical company look at how you could repurpose this, break down that chemical compound, and then reassemble it into a usable, non-toxic product. So you would actually have to separate the fluorine from the alcohol or the other products, so that you would render it inert. But then they would be able to resell whatever that residual product is, and then just dispose of the fluorinated product through incineration and solidified. So that would be a way that they could repurpose this material. Much like crude oil in its current state, raw state, serves very little purpose. So you send it to a refinery that creates gasoline, diesel, kerosene, methane, propane, to include tar, which has all kinds of applications. And then you get your different multi-chain heptanes, et cetera, that make
you can't tell that my husband is a trained chemical engineer, can you?
So that's the key.
So sometimes the words get really big, and I just have to ask him to dumb that down for me a little.
Bottom line is, it can be broken down and isolated. So that's an area that I don't have much information on as far as who is trying to spearhead that effort, but I know it's going to be a future endeavor for some chemical company.
Yep.
So,
And Bernadette follows that up saying, understood, depends on local hazardous waste laws and like salt and using it in recycling for solvent and things like that. That's great. Great. I had never even thought of that. I think that's a great plan, provided that they can figure out how to break that down appropriately without creating another problem. Well, fantastic. Great feedback. I appreciate that. And let's see, there's something else? I read comes from Paul. I've read that some states are sponsoring, coordinating collection disposal events for local fire services in Michigan. Do you know of any states taking the lead on this? That's a great question. That's a great follow-up that we can provide. I don't know of any that I've seen yet.
In our research, we have not come across that yet. I mean, we do know that states independently are taking their own actions. I haven't seen a grouping or a coalition of states that have decided to say, this is how we're going to handle our problem together, and this is where we're going to have approved collection storage sites or repurposing sites.
Yeah, and I think that where we may see that spearheaded is in those 19 states that have either pending or passed legislation. And we have that list, and we can certainly help with that. It is, it's heavily looked at in obviously Michigan, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Texas, California are some of the states that have had quite a bit of legislation, and it's just going to increase.
Yeah. And great questions, everybody. Really appreciate that. And I know some of the people, what the answer is going to be when you expect the firefighting foam requirement is immediately, because you have to do something about it, but you can't do anything about it if it's MILSPEC because you don't have it yet. So as soon as that happens, so let us know when you think you're going to have that, and we'll make sure that we'll continue to feed you information as these pieces start to unfold. It's not an overnight success, right, Jane?
That's right. It is a work in progress.
It is a work in progress. And somebody asked a question about what types of foam are available. So here's a great example of two of the foam providers that you have done research on, right?
So we actually are authorized distributors for two different foam companies. And we can speak to that, individually, in one-off conversations. It kind of depends on what the needs are of a specific group. But we do have partners. So P&S Specialty Chemicals is an affiliate partner of ours that also works with us directly in the sales in the US. And then internationally, we have the ability to sell as well through PM3 Marketing. That is our other affiliate sales team. And with Tom being the chemical engineer and 31 years in the military, and then having the global distribution expertise, I think we're very well poised to have specialists who can answer a lot of these questions and dive deeper into how we specifically help each client.
And just out of curiosity, what do you charge to talk to somebody, Tom?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I mean, the consultation is free. I mean, the hope is that our products meet a need and solve the problem for you.
Sure.
But no, my consultation, I'll answer your questions. I've got nothing to hide.
There you go. My favorite four-letter word, free. You can talk to Tom for free. So there you have.
But to answer the question, I think that we have there's fluorine-free firefighting foam. There's training foam. There is foam that's based on different different temperature sensitivities. There's several other things. Tom, do you want to add on to what else we have there?
Well, we've also got if you're worried about confined space, we have a product that reduces the LELs within a confined space so that you can go in and clean it. We've been very successful with the terminals in the Houston area, as they have to clean those big oil tankers and
wow.
fuel. We also have bioremediation product, i.e. a bug that you can put into or put over a chemical spill. And what the bug does is it goes in and combines with that and makes it inert so that remediation is not required. Now that takes 30, 60 days before it's fully clean, and you come back and test the soil, and there are no hazardous chemicals left in the soil. We have absorbents that are non-clay based that absorb 10 times the amount of a regular clay absorbent, and we have booms that for if you need to get a chemical spill out of water, it'll absorb the chemical and not the water. So we've got a myriad of products that meet certain niche needs, whether you're in the chemical business or using a chemical. And we have firefighting foam systems that are compressed air based, and they can be, like I said, designed as small as a 3-gallon system that's you can carry around like a fire extinguisher, or up to a 500-gallon system that's fixed and designed specifically. We had an issue with large power transformers that cost several $1 million, but whenever they overheat in an arid climate, once they overheat, they'll catch fire. And so in order to be able to put them out, you've got to be able to put that basically the oil fire. So transformers internally have an oil that acts as a insulator for the transfer of high voltage electricity. So our systems basically will put that fire out within about 30 seconds.
Excellent.
Which is pretty amazing, thereby saving the $8 million piece of equipment. Then you just have a crew come in, you remove that oil, replace that oil, and then you're back in business without having.
Yeah, and most importantly, though, it's not going to contaminate, further contaminate anything, and it also doesn't affect a human being, a body. So
right.
It's to have the foam, sprayed on my hand, and then have the manufacturer take a blowtorch and put it about 2 inches from my hand, and all I felt was warmth.
I want to see that. I want to see it. I want to see you do that.
Yep. And then I walked away and rinsed it off under a hose, and I didn't have any residue or anything else. I mean, it's really, it's amazing what some of these engineers and scientists have come up with.
That's the next briefing, is an on-site blowtorch to Jane's hand.
I was not, put it this way, Jane was brave enough to do it. I was like, no. Even after the manufacturer demonstrated it on his hand.
I think he's looking to try to transition the company back to a service-disabled, veteran-owned company. That's what I think.
That was the test. That's how I won. I had to put the
yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So Bernadette says,
blowtorch test.
Yeah. So Bernadette says, so you do products for response? Cool. Actual response teams too? I don't think you do response teams, but you probably know somebody that does.
We have companies that utilize our products, and they do provide response teams. So we would just need to know your area, and that we can link you to those companies. Excellent. And that would be that.
Yeah.
And so we mentioned earlier that you are not obligated to buy from anybody, including Avenues ARE. But if you would like to buy something, a lot of interest here with folks. So we really appreciate that. You guys are 8A, and you're hub zone, and you're woman owned. All those things. Rock and roll. You're not 8A though. You have partners that are 8A, right?
Correct.
Right. That's what it is. Partners that are 8A. So with that, you can reach out to those. You have those. We will send out a recap email early next week with the recording. That was the first question, was it being recorded? So with the briefing presentation, your session docs that we've talked about, your Avenues capabilities, a link to the video, as well as one-on-one meeting links, so that you guys can talk about specifics with Tom, because it costs how much, Tom?
Nothing. Zero.
Nada. So, and with that, we're a couple of minutes behind, but we really appreciate your participation and your questions. Thanks for joining us. If you need to reach out to these guys, Jane, there's Jane's information. Tom, really appreciate it. Great insight, great information. I learned a lot today. Hopefully everybody else did as well.
Thank you, Dave.
So you betcha. Thanks, guys. We appreciate what you guys do. Thanks again to the first responders that decided to join us. We love that you decided to join us. And Bradley says, thank you for the informative presentation. You are welcome, Bradley. You can come back because you're giving us props. That's all I have to say. Awesome. So you guys are welcome. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll follow up with you as needed. Okay, guys? All right. See you.